I'm sitting here at 3 a.m., wide awake, typing this on my phone because sleep isn't happening tonight. Maybe putting this mess into words will help someone else avoid the absolute disaster my life became. Fair warning, this is a long one. My name's Ethan, I'm 32, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a damn good life. I was married to Lauren, 31, and on the surface we had it all: solid jobs, a nice house in a decent neighborhood, and to anyone looking in, we were that couple. You know the type, the ones who had their lives together. We even had a giant Maine Coon named Atlas, this ridiculous, oversized ball of orange fluff who basically thought he was a dog. He'd sleep on my chest every night, attack my feet at exactly 5:30 a.m., and sit in the sink watching me get ready for work. Lauren always joked that he was more my cat than hers, and she wasn't wrong. He followed me everywhere. For 2 years, Lauren and I had been trying for a baby. 2 freaking years. At first it was exciting, hey babe, tonight might be the night, but after months of negative tests, hope started to feel like a cruel joke. Every month was the same: anticipation, disappointment, silence. I'll never forget the night Lauren sat on the bathroom floor, staring at yet another negative test, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what to say anymore. Meanwhile, our friends were posting picture-perfect family photos on Instagram, their lives moving forward while we were stuck in this endless cycle of waiting. Doctors ran every test imaginable but found nothing specifically wrong. We fell into that frustrating category of unexplained infertility, a label that gives you no answers, no solutions, just more questions. One night, Lauren suggested IVF. Her voice was shaky, like she was afraid I'd say no. I agreed immediately. No hesitation. That's what marriage is, right? A team. It wasn't cheap. Insurance only covered part of it, so we dipped into our savings, but I figured it would all be worth it in the end. Lauren took charge of the process. She told me I had enough on my plate with work, and that she'd handle the appointments. Just routine stuff, she said. The clinic will call if there's anything important. And I trusted her. Completely. I was there for the big moments, though. I held her hand during the embryo transfer, listened to the doctor explain the process, and even took a photo in the clinic room, proof that this was the day our child's life began. Everything about that moment felt like a turning point. When Lauren got pregnant, it finally felt real. The morning sickness wasn't too bad, and soon we were transforming the spare room into a nursery. One weekend I painted the whole thing myself, while Atlas helped by stepping in the paint tray and leaving tiny orange paw prints all over the carpet. We agreed to keep the baby's gender a surprise, tossing around names for both a boy and a girl. We were planning, dreaming, building our future. Or at least that's what I thought we were doing. By the time she hit the 5-month mark, Lauren was really showing, not just the big lunch kind of showing, but unmistakably pregnant. I was already picturing late-night feedings, tiny hands gripping my fingers, our lives finally moving forward. Everything seemed perfect, until I found out the truth. And the truth? The truth shattered everything. I had been preparing for fatherhood with the kind of excitement that made everything feel real. Downloading baby apps, practicing dad jokes, even wrestling with a crib that took 3 hours, a YouTube tutorial, and an unhelpful Maine Coon named Atlas to assemble. Every week I felt more ready. Every kick Lauren described, every nursery decoration we picked out, it all made me believe that after 2 long years of struggle, we were finally going to have our family. Then, on a random Tuesday night, my entire world shattered. I was at the kitchen table, sorting through insurance paperwork while Atlas purred in my lap when I saw it, something that made my stomach drop. A sperm donor ID, not mine. A completely different code, one that didn't match my patient number from the clinic. At first I thought it had to be a clerical error, a simple mix-up, but as I stared at the form, compared the numbers again and again, a creeping sense of dread wrapped around me. There was no way this was real. Lauren she couldn't do something like this. I didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while my wife slept peacefully beside me, unaware that I was drowning in doubt. The next morning, as soon as Lauren left for work, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the IVF clinic. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to force myself to believe this was all just some bureaucratic mistake, but deep down, I already knew. Inside, I approached the receptionist with a calm voice I barely recognized as my own. "Hi, I was reviewing some paperwork for my wife's treatment and noticed something strange. Can you confirm which embryo was used for our procedure?" Melissa, the receptionist, smiled at first, typing away at her computer. Then I saw it, the slight frown, the head tilt, and my chest tightened before she even spoke. "That's odd," she murmured, squinting at the screen. "It looks like the embryo used wasn't the one initially assigned to your case." My pulse roared in my ears. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then said the words that ripped my life apart. "It looks like a donor specimen was used instead." She glanced up, her confusion deepening. "But that should have required your signed consent." The room tilted. "I never signed anything." Melissa paled, checking the records again. "It says here that your wife authorized the change." Everything inside me turned to ice. "So you just switched embryos without checking with me?" She stammered something about policies, about how this wasn't supposed to happen, but I was already backing away. I didn't care about their broken protocols or their scrambling apologies. I needed to get home. I needed to hear her say it. I called my boss on the drive back, told him there was a family emergency. I must have sounded wrecked because he didn't even ask questions, just told me to take all the time I needed. I barely remembered the drive, my thoughts a chaotic storm of rage and betrayal. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were shaking. I knew in that moment, as I put my key in the door, that my life was about to split into two, before and after this conversation. Everything before this moment felt like a different life, a different reality, one where I trusted my wife, where I thought we were building a future together. And now I was standing in the wreckage of that illusion, staring at the woman who had destroyed it. I slammed the door behind me, the sound reverberating through the house. Atlas, my ever-loyal Maine Coon, bolted from his perch, his fur puffed up in alarm. Poor guy hated loud noises. I expected Lauren to be at work, but no. There she was, sitting on the couch, her face red and swollen, tears streaming down her cheeks. She already knew. "You went to the IVF center." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a confirmation of guilt. I just stood there, gripping the back of a chair, trying to keep my hands steady, trying to keep the rage from boiling over. If I started yelling, I didn't know if I'd be able to stop. "My friend Rachel works there," she whispered, her voice shaking. "She texted me. She said you were asking questions." "Rachel," that was all I needed to hear. "Is that the same friend who helped you switch the embryos?" She sucked in a breath, flinching as if I had struck her. And in that moment, I knew. I knew for certain this wasn't some kind of mistake. She had done this. She had chosen this. Why? My voice was colder than I had ever heard it. Lauren wiped her face, looking anywhere but at me. At one point, she reached for my hand, but I stepped back like she was trying to hand me a live wire. "You wouldn't understand," she finally said, still avoiding my gaze. I wanted the best for our child." I clenched my jaw. "Meaning?" She hesitated, then finally admitted, "I used an anonymous donor from the clinic's database. Someone with better genetic traits." The words hit like a punch to the gut, better than mine. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Not because it was funny, nothing about this was funny, but because this was beyond betrayal. This was insanity. "The donor has no history of heart disease or cancer," she rushed to explain. "He's tall, athletic, and has a doctorate in biochemistry. I wanted to give our baby the best start." And there it was, the truth in its ugliest form. My genes weren't good enough for her. My family's medical history, a minor heart condition in my dad, nothing life-threatening, was enough for her to erase me from my own child's DNA. "So you just decided that without telling me? You erased me from my own child's life? And you thought that was your decision to make?" Lauren stood up, cradling her belly as if I was the threat here. "It's still our baby, Ethan," she pleaded. "You'll still be the father in every way that matters." "Except actually being the father," I shot back. "Except for the part where you lied to me for months. Except for the part where you went behind my back and made this decision alone." Atlas had crept back into the room, his eyes wide, ears flicking as he watched the tension build between us. Even the damn cat knew how bad this was. "I was trying to do what's best for our family," Lauren insisted, her voice cracking. "I thought you'd understand if I just what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "If I just found out after the baby was born? When were you planning to tell me, Lauren? Or were you hoping I'd never find out? That I'd raise some stranger's kid thinking it was mine?" She didn't answer, and that was the answer. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think, trying to breathe, trying to comprehend how my wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had built a life with, could do something so monstrous. And this friend of yours at the clinic, Rachel? My voice was steel now. She just helped you commit fraud? Because that's what this is, Lauren. You forged my consent. You lied on medical documents. Her eyes widened. It wasn't like that. Rachel just helped with the paperwork. She didn't forge anything. Right, I said, laughing bitterly. She just conveniently forgot to get my signature before swapping out my sperm for some random donor. Silence. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it, again and again. Like she was trying to find the right thing to say, some excuse, some way to make this okay. But there was no making this okay. I exhaled sharply, every ounce of love, of trust, of us slipping through my fingers like sand. I had built my life around this woman. I had dreamed of a future with her. But she had already decided I wasn't good enough to be a part of it. And if she could make that choice for me, then I could make one for myself. I wasn't staying. She had swapped me out of our own child's DNA. So I was about to swap her out of my entire life. Everything I thought I knew about my life had shattered in an instant. Lauren sat back down, shoulders slumped, tears streaking her face. I thought I was doing the right thing. I really did. But there was no right thing about what she had done. No justification that could ever make this betrayal acceptable. I grabbed my keys from the counter, the weight of reality settling into my chest like a stone. I need to get out of here. I need to think. She looked up, panic flashing across her face. Where are you going? Anywhere but here. As I turned toward the door, her voice broke. Ethan, please, we can work through this. We're having a baby. I stopped, turning back to her, and for the first time since I walked into that house, I let the full truth hit her. No, Lauren, you're having a baby. I'm just the guy who was supposed to pay for it. Her face crumpled, but I was past the point of caring. I grabbed Atlas's carrier from the closet, scooped him up despite his indignant protests, and threw some food in a bag. I wasn't leaving him behind. You're taking the cat? She asked, her voice incredulous, as if that was the part that didn't make sense in this nightmare. Yeah, I'm taking the cat, I shot back. At least he's actually mine. And with that, I walked out. No plan, no destination, just the overwhelming certainty that I couldn't stay another second without saying things I could never take back. Halfway down the block, the weight of it all truly sank in. My entire life, everything I had built, every plan I had for the future, was a lie. Atlas meowed from his carrier in the passenger seat, his little paws pressing against the mesh as if trying to understand what was happening. Yeah, buddy, same. I drove for hours, aimlessly circling the city, the roads blurring under streetlights. Eventually, I found myself in front of Dylan's place. I hadn't called first, didn't even think. Just showed up at his door, looking like hell, with a cat carrier in one hand and my entire life in shambles. Dylan took one look at me and didn't bother with pleasantries. Dude, what the hell? Then, as realization dawned on him, his expression hardened. Shit, get in here. Over beers, I gave him the short version. His reaction was exactly what I expected, complete disbelief, followed by a lot of what the actual fucks and she did what. Dylan's girlfriend, Sophie, came home mid-story and immediately shifted into crisis mode, setting up the spare room and putting together a makeshift litter box for Atlas. I barely moved as they took care of everything. I just sat there staring at nothing, my mind replaying Lauren's betrayal on an endless loop. That night, I lay in the dark guest room, Atlas curled up on my chest, purring softly, oblivious to the chaos that had upended my life. My phone buzzed. Lauren's name lit up the screen for the 8th time that night. I turned it off without answering. I couldn't stomach any more of her lies. The next morning, I made a call that would change everything. Her name was Nora, my lawyer, a badass who had helped my brother through his divorce a few years back. When I told her everything, she didn't waste time sugarcoating it. If you leave now, what happens with the baby? I asked, my voice hollow. She frowned, flipping through case files. Because you're married, you're legally presumed the father unless you challenge paternity in court. If you don't contest it fast, you could be on the hook for child support, even though the baby isn't biologically yours. The air left my lungs. Lauren had almost trapped me permanently. What if I prove she committed fraud? I pressed. Nora leaned back, tapping her pen against the desk. That changes everything. If we can prove she deliberately misled you, you won't be financially responsible. The clinic's documentation helps, but we need more, ideally, a recorded or written admission from her. I was already thinking ahead. And our assets? Move them. Now, she said firmly. If she files for divorce first, she can argue for half of everything. I had come in feeling lost, blindsided. Now, for the first time in 24 hours, I had a plan, a way out. But something still gnawed at me. Lauren's whole anonymous donor with perfect genes excuse felt too convenient, too rehearsed. And if she had already crossed the line of deception, how far had she really gone? Can we subpoena the clinic's actual donor records? I asked. Nora's expression sharpened. We can try. And that was when I knew I needed to try. Because deep down, I had a feeling the worst part of this nightmare wasn't over yet. The truth was always there, hiding in the shadows of deception, waiting for me to finally shine a light on it. As I scrolled through Lauren's deleted emails, my hands tightened into fists. Every message between her and Rachel told a story of betrayal, of manipulation, of a decision that had rewritten the future without my consent. Did you switch it? One message read. It's done. He'll never know, Rachel had replied. You're a lifesaver. I just want to give my baby the best start, Lauren had written back. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just a mistake. This was calculated, planned. She had stolen my child before they even had a chance to exist. And the worst part? She had never intended for me to find out. I took screenshots, forwarded them to myself, and shut the laptop. If there had been any part of me still clinging to the idea of salvaging this marriage, it died in that moment. I wasn't just leaving Lauren, I was erasing her from my life completely. That night, I met with Nora, laid out the emails, the texts, the evidence. She skimmed through the messages, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. This changes everything. Not only do we have proof of fraud, but we can push for punitive damages in the divorce. And if we subpoena the clinic records now, there's no way they'll keep protecting her. What's the next step? I asked, my voice calm, steady. We go on the offensive. The final blow. Lauren must have sensed something shifting because over the next few days her messages took on a more desperate tone. Please, let's talk. I never meant to hurt you. We can still raise this baby together. But I was done talking. 3 days later, I got the call from Nora. The clinic cracked. We have the donor's identity. I held my breath. It's Michael. I blinked. Michael who? She hesitated. Michael Parker. It hit me like a freight train. Michael Parker, Lauren's ex. The one she had dated for years before we met. The one she always got distant about whenever his name came up. The one she swore she hadn't spoken to in years. The anger I had felt before was nothing compared to this. She hadn't just swapped our embryo for some superior genes. She had chosen him, deliberately. She had used our money, our resources, and our marriage as a cover to have a baby with another man. I had been nothing but a placeholder. I didn't respond to her texts. I didn't call. Instead, I let my lawyer do the talking. The divorce papers. Lauren received them on a Wednesday morning. I knew because she called me 7 times in a row. Then came the frantic emails. The please, Ethan, let's fix this. The I was scared, I didn't know how to tell you. The I love you, don't do this. I let her beg. Then finally I picked up one of her calls. Her voice was raw. Ethan, please, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but we can still be a family. You made your choice, Lauren. My voice was calm, detached, and now I'm making mine. I was scared, she whispered. I just wanted the best for our child. Our child? I let out a short laugh, one without humor. He's not mine, Lauren. He never was. That was your plan all along. She sobbed, but I didn't feel anything anymore. The woman I thought I had married was gone. Then I delivered the final blow. I know about Michael. Silence. I know it was never some anonymous donor. I know it was him, and I know you did it on purpose. Her breathing hitched. She knew she had no more lies left to hide behind. This marriage is over, I said firmly. I'll fight you in court if I have to, but I won't be this kid's father. I won't be your safety net. And I sure as hell won't let you take another dime from me. More silence. Then finally, in a voice so small I barely heard it, she whispered, I never meant to lose you. I sighed. But you did. And with that, I hung up. Moving on, the divorce was swift, thanks to Nora's work. With the fraud documented, Lauren walked away with nothing. No alimony, no claim to my assets. And most importantly, no child support. She had built this fantasy of having a child with Michael, using me as the unknowing provider. But in the end, all she had was the wreckage of her own choices. As for me, I moved on. It wasn't easy, but I refused to let her betrayal define the rest of my life. Atlas and I found a new place. A quiet apartment with big windows where he could sit and watch the world. He adjusted faster than I did, but eventually, the heaviness started to fade. One day, months later, I got a text from Dylan. Lauren had the baby. I stared at the screen for a long time before finally typing my response, "Not my problem." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The moment I saw Connor's name in that email thread, everything clicked. This wasn't some impulsive mistake or a desperate decision in the heat of the moment. Lauren had orchestrated this from the start. The secrecy, the convenient doctor's appointments she insisted on handling alone, the donor she swore was anonymous. It was all a lie, built on the foundation of a plan she'd been constructing for months. And now, staring at the proof in front of me, I felt something inside me snap. I documented everything. Screenshots of emails, text messages, the clinic's records, all the pieces of evidence that proved she hadn't just deceived me, but had meticulously planned to cut me out of my own child's existence. Then, with my hands still shaking, I forwarded everything to Nora. Her response came in almost immediately. "This changes everything," she said, her voice sharp with barely contained fury. "This isn't just fraud, Ethan. This is calculated, premeditated deception. The judge is going to have a field day with this." "So what's our next move?" I asked, feeling an eerie sense of calm settle over me. "We keep gathering evidence," she replied, "and we find this Connor guy." That part was easy. A quick search led me straight to him. Connor Matthews, physical therapist, working at a clinic barely 30 minutes from the house I used to share with Lauren. His face was exactly as I remembered from the old photos she used to show me, the ones she'd linger on just a little too long before swearing she was just reminiscing. Tall, athletic, the golden boy type. The kind of guy who walked away from a relationship unscathed, while the other person carried the weight of their shared history. I booked an appointment under a fake name. Not my most ethical moment, but ethics had stopped being my priority the second I found out my wife had deliberately erased me from my own child's life. The moment I stepped into his treatment room, recognition flickered across his face, quickly followed by guilt. "Ethan," he said, stiffening, "what are you doing here?" I closed the door behind me, folding my arms as I watched him squirm. "I think you already know." To his credit, he didn't try to deny it. He just sat down heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "She told me you agreed to it," he admitted. "Said you both had talked about using a donor and that you were fine with it being me." I scoffed. "And you believed that? That I'd be okay with my wife carrying her ex-boyfriend's baby behind my back?" He flinched. "Looking back, no, it doesn't make sense, but Lauren can be. See, convincing." "Tell me about it," he muttered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could see it, the regret on his face. But regret wasn't enough. "For what it's worth, I didn't know she was lying to you," he said quietly. "I wouldn't have agreed if I had. I didn't know if I believed him, but it didn't really matter, because this wasn't about him. This was about her." I left without another word and called Nora the second I got back to my car. "We've got him," I said. "Good," she replied. "Now it's time to make sure she loses everything." The divorce was swift, brutal, and left Lauren with nothing. The judge took one look at the evidence, the emails, the forged documents, the blatant deception, and ruled in my favor without hesitation. Not only was I legally absolved of any responsibility for the child, but Lauren was also ordered to compensate me for the financial losses I had incurred during the IVF process. Fraud, after all, had its price. She tried to fight it. She cried in court. She pleaded. She painted herself as a woman who had only wanted the best for her baby. But the evidence was too damning, the lies too deep. When the final ruling came down, her world shattered. No financial support, no cushy alimony, no legal claim to my assets. She wasn't just losing me, she was losing everything she had built on the foundation of her betrayal. The last time I saw her was in that courtroom. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, some final plea for forgiveness. But I just turned and walked away, and just like that, she was nothing to me. Months later, I was sitting on my new apartment balcony, Atlas curled up beside me, when my phone buzzed. A text from Dylan. Lauren had the baby. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the words settle. The child that was supposed to be mine but never was. Then slowly I typed my response. Not my problem. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I finally felt free. The moment the words left my mouth, the air in the room shifted. The color drained from Lauren's face, her hands trembled, and her breath hitched like she'd just been caught stealing. Because she'd stolen years from me, stolen the family we were supposed to build together, stolen my trust. And now, cornered with no way out, she did what she always did when things didn't go her way, she cried. Big, gasping sobs, hands clutching her stomach as if playing the victim would somehow erase what she'd done. But this time, it wasn't going to work. It's not what you think, she whimpered, tears streaking down her face. I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Really? Because I think you deliberately chose your ex-boyfriend's sperm, manipulated the system, lied to my face for months, and planned to let me raise another man's child without ever telling me the truth. So tell me, Lauren, what part of that am I getting wrong? She shook her head, still trying to reach for me, but I stepped back. I just wanted what was best for our baby, she whispered, voice trembling. No, I said, voice sharp enough to cut through her pathetic act. You wanted what was best for you. You wanted Connor's baby, and you wanted me to foot the bill and play daddy while you lived out some sick fantasy. Her face crumpled. I was scared, Ethan. I was afraid that my genes weren't good enough, that I wasn't good enough, I snapped. She stilled, like the weight of her own choices had just crashed down on her all at once. But it was too late for regrets, too late for excuses. I would have been a great father, I said quietly, but not to a child you created with another man behind my back. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Then I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and slid them across the table. What is this? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. This is me making sure you never get another chance to lie to me again. Her hands shook as she picked up the papers, scanning through them like she could somehow will away the reality in front of her. Ethan, please. We can go to therapy, we can. No, Lauren, we can't, I interrupted. You don't come back from this. There's no fixing a marriage when one person spends years planning how to betray the other. I'm done. And by the way, you're on your own for the medical bills. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. What? I smirked. I spoke to my lawyer. Since the baby isn't biologically mine and the IVF was done under false pretenses, I don't owe you a damn thing. No child support, no spousal support, nothing. You wanted Connor's kid? Go find Connor and ask him to be daddy. The devastation on her face would have hurt me once. Now, it felt like justice. She looked down at the papers again, tears dripping onto the page. You really hate me that much? No, I said honestly. I just don't love you anymore. And I sure as hell don't trust you. I turned to leave but paused at the door, glancing back one last time. Oh, and one more thing. Atlas is coming with me. Her eyes widened. Ethan, come on, you can't. He was always mine, I cut her off. At least he never pretended to be something he wasn't. With that, I walked out. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, packing up my life, and waiting for the divorce to be finalized. Lauren fought it at first, but she had no ground to stand on. The evidence was airtight, and once the judge saw proof of her deception, he ruled in my favor without hesitation. No financial obligation, no shared assets, no lingering ties. She tried reaching out a few times, calling, texting, even showing up at Dylan's, but I never responded. There was nothing left to say. Then, one afternoon, Dylan walked into the living room, phone in hand. You're gonna want to see this, he said, smirking. I took the phone and felt my own smirk forming as I scrolled through the screen. Lauren's ex, Connor, had taken to social media with a statement. Apparently, she'd gone to him, panicked and desperate, demanding that he step up and be a father now that I was out of the picture. And guess what? He wanted nothing to do with her. Looks like karma finally showed up, Dylan chuckled. Yeah, I said, tossing the phone back to him. She deserves every bit of it. I should have felt bad. I should have felt something. But all I felt was relief. Months later, I was sitting on my apartment balcony, Atlas curled up in my lap, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. My phone buzzed. Lauren, I had the baby today. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message. She was nothing to me now. And for the first time in a long time, I finally felt free. The sheer audacity of these people, standing in my living room uninvited, waving a baby in my face, acting like the last 6 months never happened. Like there hadn't been a court ruling, a DNA test, a damn paper trail a mile long proving that I had nothing to do with this child. Lauren stood there crying, rocking the baby in her arms, her mother gripping her shoulder like she was the fragile victim in all this. Meanwhile, her father paced back and forth, spewing something about Christian duty and doing the right thing. And Jason? Jason stood inches from my face, fists clenched, like he thought intimidation would somehow rewrite reality. I let them talk, let them spill every excuse, every manipulative plea, every desperate attempt to force me back into the life I had already burned to the ground. Then I laughed, a real, genuine laugh, because this was pathetic. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, "Let me get this straight. You," I pointed at Lauren, "lied to me, defrauded me, used my money to have another man's child, and tried to trap me into raising him. Then you," I turned to her mother, "went around telling everyone I abandoned my pregnant wife. And now that Connor ran off and left you all high and dry, you want me to step in and pick up the pieces? Is that about right?" Lauren sobbed harder. "I was wrong, Ethan. I see that now. Please just," I held up a hand, cutting her off. "No, you don't get to please me anymore, Lauren. You made your choice, and now you get to live with it." Her father tried to interject, going on about forgiveness, but I wasn't having it. "Forgiveness? You mean like how she forged my consent at a medical facility, lied to my face for months, planned to let me raise another man's child? Yeah, no thanks." Jason's jaw tightened. "The kid needs a father." "Then maybe you should have raised your sister better," I shot back. That hit a nerve. His nostrils flared, and for a second I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But I didn't care. What else could they do to me? I had already lost everything they could take. Lauren's mother grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Please, Ethan, just think about it. We're all family. We can fix this." I yanked my arm away and gestured around the room. "Look around. Do you see family photos on these walls? Do you see any evidence that you people still belong in my life? Because I don't." I grabbed the front door and swung it open. "Now get out." They didn't move. I sighed and pulled out my phone. "Fine. I'll call the cops. I'll have a restraining order by morning, and I guarantee if you pull this stunt again, I'll press charges for trespassing." Lauren's mom gasped like I had physically slapped her. "Ethan, don't be so cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated, my voice low. "You want to talk about cruelty? How about spending 2 years trying to start a family with someone who was secretly plotting to cut you out of it? How about trusting someone so completely, only to find out they never saw you as anything more than a paycheck and a placeholder?" Silence. For once, none of them had anything to say. Lauren sniffled, staring at the baby in her arms, rocking him gently. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were desperate, pleading. "I don't know what to do, Ethan." I met her gaze, unmoved. "Not my problem." She choked on a sob, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't her safety net. I wasn't her backup plan. I was free. I pointed to the open door. "Out, now." Lauren lingered for a moment, eyes searching mine for something. Sympathy, regret, maybe even love. But there was nothing left to find. Finally, she turned and walked out. Her parents followed, but Jason shot me one last glare before slamming the door behind him. I let out a long breath. It was over. That night, I sat on my couch, Atlas curled in my lap, the weight of the entire confrontation finally sinking in. Lauren was out of my life for good. She had made her choices. She had gambled everything. Our marriage, our future, my trust, and lost. And me? I had won. Not in some grand dramatic way, not with revenge or public humiliation, but with the quiet kind of victory. The kind where I could wake up every morning and know I was free. Free from manipulation, free from betrayal, free to build a future that was mine. Atlas stretched, pawing at my shirt, and let out a loud, satisfied purr. I smirked, scratching his chin. "Yeah, buddy, we did good." I stood firm, refusing to let Jason intimidate me. "Leave." My voice was steady, unwavering, but Jason, fueled by anger and arrogance, shoved me. "You're just going to abandon your wife and child?" he spat. I didn't even flinch. I simply stared him down and replied, "She's not my wife, and that's not my child. And if you touch me again, I'm calling the cops." Behind him, Lauren was a wreck, full-on sobbing, shoulders shaking, tears streaking down her face. "Please, Ethan, I can't do this alone. My parents are helping, but I had to quit my job. We're barely making ends meet." For a fleeting second, I almost felt something. Not sympathy, not regret, just a distant echo of what once was. But then, as quickly as it came, it vanished. Because I remembered. The lies, the betrayal. The months of deception, of being played like a fool while she carried another man's child under my roof. Jason took a step toward me again, aggressive, ready to escalate, but his father grabbed his arm, holding him back. Still, Jason snarled, "You'll regret this. We know where you work. We know where your parents live." That was it. Line crossed. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and held it up between us. "Are you threatening me? Should I call the police now, or would you like to leave peacefully?" They froze. Jason clenched his fists, nostrils flaring, but he knew I had him. A single call, a single video sent to the police, and this would become his problem, not mine. Lauren's dad turned back as they finally started retreating. "This isn't what a real man would do." I let out a breathless laugh, shaking my head. A real man doesn't let himself be manipulated. And with that, I shut the door in their faces. The next morning, Lauren's family made their last, desperate attempt to drag me back into their mess. They contacted Nora, my lawyer, trying to reopen the case. Maybe they thought a sob story about Lauren's financial struggles would be enough. It wasn't. Nora shut it down immediately. Firm, final. The DNA test was conclusive. The court ruling was finalized. I was legally, financially, and personally free. But I wasn't about to let my guard down. Jason's threat, the way he had seethed with rage, wasn't something I could just ignore. I installed security cameras around my house, documented every detail of the confrontation, and filed a police report. I wasn't going to let them blindside me. Jason had said they knew where I worked. Fine, I got ahead of them. I went to my boss, laid out the situation, and made sure that if anything happened, any rumors, any harassment, it would be traced back to them. Through it all, Atlas never left my side. He must have sensed the shift in me, the weight I was finally letting go of. He became even more protective, curling up next to me at night, following me from room to room, his quiet presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. Days passed, then a week, then 2. No more calls, no more uninvited visitors, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt at peace. I still didn't feel bad for Lauren. She made her choice. She gambled everything, our marriage, my trust, my future, and lost. But the kid? Yeah. I felt bad for him. He didn't ask to be born into this disaster. Didn't ask to have a mother who saw people as tools, not family. But feeling bad? That doesn't mean I'm responsible. Lauren's consequences are her own. And me, I finally get to live my life.